I was asked under oath in a congressional hearing to pledge that we would never again produce any more energy than we were at that point in time. And some of the other companies that were at that hearing agreed to that. I did not, because I said, look, the demand for our products is going up, not down.
Let's get the big question out of the way first. Do you watch Landman?
I do.
You do? What do you think?
It's a great show.
Is it a good depiction of your new home in Texas?
Well, I mean, a good show needs to take some liberties with reality and create some drama. And so there are certain aspects of it that are actually very true. You know, it's about a small company competing in, out in West Texas. A little bit different than what the realities are at a large company, but a lot of the core activities that are required are pretty accurate.
Yeah. So look, you became CEO in 2018. You think about everything you've been through. You experienced negative oil prices. Who thought that could happen? Yep. You had the pandemic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine and all the impact that had on the energy business. Been through a wild political period where for a while there was a large group of people who thought what you did was inherently evil. And then after that, there was a group of people elected who shouted, "Drill, baby, drill." It's hard to imagine bigger swings in public opinion. What do you see? What have you been able to do in all that chaos? What's the biggest change that you've implemented as CEO of Chevron?
Well, I think, one of the things, I've been in this business for a long time, 43 years with one company. And so I've seen wars, I've seen terrorist attacks, I've seen high oil prices, low oil prices. And you realize that these things, most of them don't last. And so you don't overreact in the moment to some of the volatility. It's a commodity business. It's inherently volatile. It's a business that is deeply technology dependent, and technology moves in one direction, making things more efficient. And it's a very politically important industry in every country in the world, because every country in the world is either a big producer of energy and exports it, or they're reliant on imports. And so it's very vital to their economies. And so the thing that I guess I have been reminded of is to try to steer a pretty steady course through what can be very choppy waters. And we try to keep our business, I've tried to stay focused on the fundamentals of demand, technology, competition, policy, and balance those out and not get swung by the issues of the moment, but to try to look through that, because we make investments that have very, very long life cycles.
But so with that focus, not get too influenced by short-term forces, have a long-term goal, what do you see as the biggest change that you've made in the company over the 7 years you've been in?
So when I came in, we were coming out of a phase as an industry, and certainly our company is part of this, where China had come into the global economy in a big way, had driven demand for commodities of all types. And oil prices, you'll remember back in the 2000s, were over $100, $140 in 2008. And there was a lot of talk about peak oil. There was a book, Twilight in the Desert, Saudi Arabia was going to start to decline in production, and a belief that we had to go to the farthest corners of the earth to continue to produce the energy, or there were going to be wars fought. Today, it's quite the opposite. The discussion is about peak demand. But coming out of that period of time, our industry was overspending to try to respond to this perceived, to the high prices and this perceived looming shortage. And we lost discipline on capital. And when you allocate capital in the tens of billions of dollars every year that has very long life cycles, you can misallocate capital and you have to live with it for a very long time. And so my very first priority was to return some form of capital discipline to our company initially, and then really to try to set an example for the rest of the industry. This is, look, we need to be more disciplined in how we allocate capital.
And you've succeeded at that, you believe?
I think we have, and I think our industry has. There are a bunch of companies in the shale business who were not returning a penny of cash to shareholders. They were reinvesting every single dollar of cash flow and then borrowing more just to grow.
Yeah.
And what we've seen now is the industry is much more focused on disciplined capital investment, capital efficiency, returning cash to shareholders, still meeting customer demand, but doing it in a more capital efficient
What's
manner.
been the biggest surprise to you over the last 7 years?
I mean, it's the geopolitical surprises are so hard to predict. You know there will be a geopolitical event, but what happened in Israel was a surprise. What happened in Ukraine was a surprise. COVID was a big surprise, and so there have been any number of those. People talk about black swans, and we've had a number of things that were very hard to predict, and in our industry, again, the top line can swing very rapidly, much faster than our costs do, and so strong balance sheet and cost and capital discipline are how you steer through those things.
Yeah. So can we talk about the politics a little bit? I
Sure.
mean, politics has obviously been a big part of the last 7 years. I mean, at one point you had a member of Congress saying you should stop right now producing, exploring for more oil. And in fact, some of the European companies made exactly that commitment. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I was asked under oath in a congressional hearing to pledge that we would never again produce any more energy than we were at that point in time. And some of the other companies that were at that hearing agreed to that. I did not, because I said, look, the demand for our products is going up, not down, and we need to meet the demand. If we don't, what happens is prices go higher, and that's not good for the economy. It's not good for consumers. And so it's back to, I talked about the fundamentals of supply and demand and technology. If the demand for your products is growing, you should work to meet that demand and not pledge to not do so.
Well, you have supply and demand, but you also have externalities. I mean, how do you think, in that context, how do you think about the climate challenge?
Well, the climate challenge is real. I think the world has begun. You've seen, people like Bill Gates, the International Energy Agency, modifying what had previously been positions which I think fed a belief, a misguided belief, that this energy transition could happen faster than it in fact can. And I always had a view that we would see the energy system evolve the way that it always has for the last 150 years. But as long as demand is growing, it's really a system that has added new forms of energy supply over time. The world uses as much biomass today as it did in the 1850s, when biomass was the predominant source of energy in the world. In fact, we've never seen a supply of any type of energy actually decline. The demand for coal is higher than it's ever been today. Demand for oil is higher than it's ever been. Demand for hydro is higher than it's ever been. Wind, solar. We've seen a system that adds new supplies to meet the needs of a growing world, where most of the people still don't have a lifestyle that you and I would recognize.
But there's more to this than simply meeting demand. I mean, how do you think about, or what is your responsibility as a company to try and shift energy production in a direction that will help the climate?
Well, first thing we do is we reduce our own emissions. And so we've always done that for years. First criteria pollutants, and now greenhouse gas emissions. We've made commitments. We've reduced emissions on both oil and gas production by over 40% in less than a decade. We've invested in technologies that can help contribute to lower carbon parts of the economy. We've got carbon capture and storage facilities up and running, sequestering millions of tons a year of CO2. We're in the process of starting the world's largest, one of the 3 largest green hydrogen facilities on the planet. And in fact, it'll have the largest hydrogen storage of any facility in the world. And it'll have, this one site in Utah will store more energy than 2 to 3 times all the grid-connected batteries in the entire United States.
So this gets back to that question of capital allocation. How do you decide how much of your capital to devote to those more future-focused carbon reduction?
Yeah, so we start with things where we have some reason to believe that we can create shareholder value, where we've got skills and competency. So we didn't go into wind or solar because we're not a turbine manufacturer. Installing wind and solar doesn't take unique skills, so we didn't bring any value to that. We've not gone into merchant power generation because they're very good incumbents that can integrate into the power system. So we worked on things that leverage our capabilities, our customers, our value chains, and such things like hydrogen, both green and blue hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, geothermal, where there's some interesting work that's going on, biofuels, we're the U.S. second largest producer of bio-based diesel. And so we worked on things that are extension of our core capabilities. And then the second criteria is things that have the ability to compete and meet customer needs without relying on long-term subsidies. There's certainly a case for subsidies or other forms of government policy to help technologies get established, bring them down the cost curve. But over time, we need to invest in things that can compete and deliver return on capital without relying on a subsidy.
And so which of those is most likely to break through? You talked about hydrogen, you talked about carbon capture, you talked about geothermal. Where do you put the most hope?
Yeah, they all struggle right now on an unsubsidized basis. They all require some form of policy. Biofuels have been around the longest and I think are the most well-established. There's something called the Renewable Fuel Standard, which came during the Bush 43 administration, which has been around for a long time now. It fuses agriculture policy and energy policy, and that's a well-established market. Hydrogen's proven to be very difficult. You're fighting the laws of thermodynamics at a huge scale there. Geothermal, I think, offers some real promise. It's early days for some of the novel and advanced geothermal, but we're excited about that. And carbon capture and storage kind of sits in the middle of all of that.
So there's not one of them that you say this is the answer?
There's no silver bullets. We need it all. I mean, it used to, I think, be kind of fashionable across both sides of the aisle to say an all of the above energy policy is what we need. We then got into an exclusionary policy where we're ruling out solutions, and we need to rule solutions in. We need nuclear. I mean, nuclear is beginning to have a lot more support today than it once did, and we need it as a country and for the world. We need more support for nuclear, which is the ultimate low carbon
And what's your
technology.
role in that?
We've got venture investments in companies that are working on fusion, on small modular reactors. If we're going to decarbonize some of our remote facilities in the world, small modular nuclear would be a wonderful solution for us.
So, you've talked about this steady approach you take in a world where the politics has been up and down, pretty wild. I want to talk a little bit about your relationship with presidents. At one point during the Biden administration, I think you publicly released a pretty tough letter, or if you didn't, somebody publicly released a pretty tough letter you wrote to President Biden. Can you talk about why you decided to do that?
Yeah, because he had written a letter to me that was released to the media a week earlier, which was filled with misinformation and unsupportable allegations.
Saying?
This is during the time right after the Ukraine war began. And it alleged profiteering and price gouging and all kinds of behavior. There was no evidence to support it. In fact, I had been in the White House the week that the letter came out and speaking to his senior advisors, and nobody breathed a word of it to me. And then I read the letter in the New York Times while I was on vacation. So I wrote a letter back and I said, Mr. President, I think your information is not accurate and I would like to meet with you and work with you on solutions, but we've got to have an honest conversation about
Did you release it?
I did. After it was delivered to him,
first,
I allowed it to be released. That didn't happen with the first letter.
Yeah. Was that a hard decision to make?
No. I had to stand up for our people in our industry when we were being plastered across the mainstream media with an inaccurate set of facts. I owed it to our company and our shareholders and our employees.
Did you ever get a response from the White House?
No.
No? Would you, so you got a different president now, would you say the current president's views are more closer to your own?
Well, the current president is a believer in American energy abundance as a source of economic strength and national security.
But he also believes climate change is a joke.
He has not been he's been a skeptic on the seriousness
I would
of
say
climate
it's a
change.
little further, more than skepticism.
But look, he's a believer in American energy. He's actually a supporter, really, of all energy. He's not a big fan of wind, I guess I would say, but you know, he's. I think he wants to see America strong, and this country's blessed with energy resources that are the envy of most of the other countries.
Do you talk
in the
to him
world.
regularly?
I speak to him. I don't know. I'd say regularly, but I do speak.
You
to
feel
him.
you're listened to when you speak to him?
Yeah, the president does listen. Absolutely.
Venezuela is another area, you know, we seem to be approaching almost war with Venezuela. Venezuela is a country very important to Chevron. Chevron has a major interest there. Have you talked to him about that?
I have spoken to him about Venezuela, not recently, but we've operated in Venezuela for most of the last 100 years. We're the only American company still operating in the country. So I've got employees down there. I've got to be concerned about their safety. Venezuelan crude oil is highly desired by U.S. refineries, and so we bring some of that to U.S.
But some people say that operation is Maduro's lifeline, provides him. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the sanctions that we operate under and have been for a long time restrict payments to the Venezuelan government. They're very restrictive in terms of what we can do in terms of activity.
The money's not supporting the government.
We pay we're not allowed to pay taxes or royalties with the revenue that we generate from crude sales to our customers.
If this escalates, could you imagine a situation where you're forced to withdraw from Venezuela?
You know, we've had conversations with both the prior administrations about the importance of having an American presence on the ground there to try to maintain some continuity through political cycles, which in our business, we don't choose where the resource is, and so we have to live through. We don't pick governments. We work with the governments in the countries where we operate, and if we left every time we had a disagreement with the government, we would be leaving everywhere, including this country.
Talk a little bit about how you deal with the polarization personally. Put Washington aside for a minute. We live at a time where the public is far more polarized on these issues than it's ever been before. That has to affect you on an almost day-to-day basis, and your family as well. How do you respond?
Well, you know, we just moved our headquarters last year from California to Texas. Those are the two states where we've got our largest employee populations, and so we're kind of the ultimate purple company with, you know, one
But why'd
foot
you
in
move?
a blue state, 1 foot in a red state.
Why
I'll come back to that.
Okay.
But look, I think Brian said it very well earlier. They're serving everybody, and their customers are our employees. Come from every walk of life and have every point of view. We stay out of try to stay out of the kind of the broad political discourse and stick to things that are important to our business. We left California because it had been our home. We've been there for 145 years. We were the last of what at one point in time were many companies in our industry who called California their home. Texas is the center of the universe for our industry. It's where the companies are, the service companies we work with, the universities we recruit from. And so it makes sense there for us to have our home in Texas.
Maybe it's a related question. I mean, Brian talked about how significant the people challenge was, that people were so important. Mm-hmm. How do you think about culture? If people think of Chevron as being the nice oil company, I think that's in comparison to the other oil company. But what is the culture of Chevron? What should the culture be, and how have you thought about dealing with that and changing it? Yeah,
no, we think deeply about that. For decades, we've been guided by a document called the Chevron Way. It lays out our purpose to provide the affordable, reliable, and ever cleaner energy that enables human progress. Talks about a vision to be the global energy most admired for people, partnership, and performance. People come first. Yeah. In that, partnership comes second. Both of those in our industry are critical to deliver performance. And then it lays out 5 core values. So we've long been committed to this. It's evolved a little bit over time as society and the workforce has evolved. But you know, the companies in our industry have different cultures, and you can You can buy assets, you can license technology, you can enter countries, there are a lot of things that you can copy strategies. It's hard to copy culture.
You own.
And culture can be a differentiator, absolutely.
What is the difference between the Chevron culture and the Exxon culture?
Well, look, I'm going to just talk about our culture and what I
You can
value.
do a little comparison for us.
Well, I'll go back to the vision on people, partnership, and performance. I feel for Brian when he talks about 50% employee turnover. We have 3% employee turnover.
Wow.
And so we have, that leads you do the math, it's like an average 33-year career. So we have multi-decade service. We have a lot of employees whose parents, grandparents worked for our company. And so respect for individuals, investment in people and development is a big part of it. We've long been committed to diversity and inclusion. We work all over the world. We need people that represent all walks of life, that bring experiences from every aspect of society. And in our business, partnership is vital. And so we've got to look for win-win relationships when we work with host governments, with other partners, and not win-lose.
There was a McKinsey study that got some coverage a while back that suggested maybe you had over-indexed on the people part as opposed to the performance, that maybe it was too nice of a culture. Did you ever feel that?
Yeah, the news reports on that I would differ with a little bit. It wasn't actually a McKinsey report. It was a little bit of consulting work they had done. And look, one of the things we've been doing the last year as we've gone through some organizational changes is talking about having a little more of a performance edge in our culture. And so we do have, a lot of people would describe us as a nice company. Sometimes we're not as direct with different opinions as we could be.
Yeah.
And for fear of offending somebody, if I disagree with you, I might not really want to say that because I don't want to hurt your feelings. And you don't get to better solutions if you don't really hear different points of view, if you don't then make decisions, and you don't have some accountability for results. And so we're working on sharpening up some aspects of our performance culture that I think were a little misrepresented in the
But
media
could
coverage
use
of
some
this.
sharpening.
Could use some sharpening, yeah.
Let's talk about how you got here. Where did you learn leadership skills?
Well, I grew up playing team sports, and so coaches were a very early influence of mine. When I was 10 years old, I was on a football team that won several championships in a row, and we didn't have any special talent, but we had a coach who would take all his vacation during the beginning of the football season, and we would have 3 practices a day. And I learned at a young age you can actually outwork the other guy. And so it instilled in me this belief that, okay, if I just work harder, I can get ahead. There's value in that. I had another coach when I was in high school who was a triathlete, and I had a broken hand, a basketball coach. So we went for a run. I grew up in Golden, Colorado, and we ran up a mountain called Lookout Mountain that sits above this little town. And I never thought I could run all the way to the top of this mountain, but I was 16 years old, and I was going to let my coach go up there, and I couldn't do it. And what I learned from that is he actually saw that I could do something that I didn't believe I could do. So it helped me, as I started coaching people, find things in people and pull them out. And then I guess the last thing I would say is my 3 predecessors all served in their roles as CEO for about a decade. And until we left California, I lived within a few miles of all 3 of them. Huh. And I could pull them in for lunch multiple times a year and draw on them for mentorship, for advice, for history of the company. And I was incredibly blessed to have access to the 3 of them for many years.
Fascinating, yeah. Look, this has to be a grueling job. You seem to take it in such stride, but it has to be a difficult job. How long are you going to do it?
Well, the board and I are having that conversation. I've been doing this for 8 years, and look, as soon as we've got the next person ready to go, my job is to get out of the way and find somebody that's better prepared than I am and hand the baton over to them.
When that time comes, how do you want your tenure to be remembered?
Oh, I'd like it to be remembered that I stewarded the company that has 150 years of rich history in a way that preserved its strengths, that built on some areas where we needed to improve, and handed it off in better shape to the next person.
What's the most important advice you will give your successor?
Oh, boy, I haven't really reached the point where I'm fully thinking about that yet.
I'm not trying to rush you. I'm not trying.
No.
You know, there's a fair amount of evidence, by the way, that says CEOs reach their best performance after year 10. I'm sure you've seen it. Maybe you've given it to your board. I don't know.
No, I'm not going to bank on many years after year 10. Look, one of the things that I've learned, and Brian talked about Frank Blake. Frank was somebody I spent some time talking to
Home Depot.
early on. Yeah. And you know, one of the things that he imparted to me is it's not about you. And you get into these jobs and you can think, oh, you know, he said, you've got an important job, but it doesn't make you an important person. And so I think humility is a quality that's really important in CEOs. And it's easy, you get into these jobs and, you know, people laugh at your jokes that aren't really funny, and they tell you you're better looking than you really are. You know, you need people that'll tell you the truth. And so, so that's one. I guess the other thing that I've really learned in this job is coaches don't win games, players do. Yeah. So you got to put the right people in the right positions around you. If I think about mistakes,
that's the second time you've referred to yourself as a coach. That's the way you think about the job.
Yeah, and you need to get the right people in the right positions. And if you do that, anything's possible. If you have the wrong people in the wrong roles, even simple things are very hard.
We got 50 seconds left. Some quick questions. What kind of car do you drive? Electric, hybrid, gas?
Gas.
Gas. Guzzler? Big one?
Medium.
Wine, whiskey, or water?
Wine.
Wine. Rolling Stones or Willie Nelson?
Both.
And favorite TV show? You already told us about Landman. Anything else you want to mention?
Well, your earlier one, I'm a huge fan of Ted Lasso. I think there's a lot of wisdom in
Those are very different shows.
They're both great shows.
You learn a little leadership from both of them?
You can learn a lot of leadership from Ted Lasso.
All right. Mike Wirth, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it.